Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devin Decker, and joining me in an almost stunned silence, Sejohn Sarowick. Sejohn?
Stunned silence? I wouldn't call it that. Man, we're recording on a different day than usual, and so my brain is trying to get into gear.
Oh, I really thought that it was because I decided to do a vocal warm-up. That I have specific vocal warm-ups for every day of the week. And what you've just heard is my Saturday vocal warm-up.
Oh.
So, and it seemed to surprise you in a way that I wasn't expecting.
It involved a lot more uvula than I think I was expecting.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
That's what I have to, Saturday is uvula day. That's just how it works. So with the Say Report, we're a show about everything, and since Sejohn is still trying to acclimate, I have a list of notes that I'd like to go over relating to things that we've talked about in previous episodes of the show. You want to start there, Sejohn, and then we can jump off?
Yeah, no,
maybe.
No, Devin does some house cleaning is one of my favorite bits on the show, so let's do it.
All right, so I want to say like 100 episodes ago, I heard for the first time "Walk the Dinosaur" by Was Not Was, and we had a very long debate about the song and what "Walking the Dinosaur" means.
Right. Yeah.
Yesterday, it came on the shuffle on my iPod, well, on my Spotify. I use Spotify, not a sponsor. And I love that song. I freaking love that song, Walk the Dinosaur. But it's how my day started. And then the rest of my day, I watched the video, and I went down a Was Not Was, Walk the Dinosaur hole, as it were. And I found an interesting story. Well, first of all, do you want to know what Walking the Dinosaur is, Sejohn?
Okay, yes. So what is Walk the Dinosaur?
Nothing. It's a fucking nonsense song. It's I honestly believe in the actual lyrics of the song that it's nighttime and he has to take his pet dinosaur for a walk.
I thought, I mean, and it might be something more akin to this. I've always taken Walk the Dinosaur as the dance like an Egyptian, or everybody do the twist, right? Like that's it's that kind of phrase.
Right, and that's exactly what that's really what it is. Having watched the music video 2 times yesterday, and I would have gone back for more, but someone stopped it and is like, you need to come back to us, Devin. We need you back from 1989. Walk the Dinosaur is a dance. There's dance moves with it. You take your hands and you extend from your chest outwards to open the door, and then you step forward and turn to the right to get on the floor, and then you hold your left arm across your torso and you make your right arm like a brontosaurus neck and you make it walk. That's what Walking the Dinosaur is.
Oh, man. And there is no better dance move than one that involves a lot of extended arm motions. People just love it when you do that sort of stuff in public.
Oh, it is. I would love to try this out in the discotheque. I'm going to be honest with you. I'd have to find a DJ who would play Walk the Dinosaur for me, and then I'd need to find a dance floor that's not crowded with people where I could do this elaborate dance move. But 1989, it was a different time. Let's be honest about it. But the best story that came from this, right? And it wouldn't have happened if we didn't talk about Walk the Dinosaur. However many episodes ago we talked about what Walk the Dinosaur. If you know, let us know at the Say Report on Twitter. Because of the success of the song's video, they landed a spot on that 1989 Club MTV tour. Do you know that tour? Do you know why that tour is infamous?
Why is it infamous? That part I don't know.
It's when Milli Vanilli's recording malfunctioned, right. So they were exposed as lip syncing. Other bands that were on that, I'm going to go in notoriety, right, from least notoriety to most notoriety. Information Society, Tone Loc, and Paula Abdul. Now, that's fine. It's 1989. It makes sense that they'd be touring with MTV. But the interesting thing, and what I'm sharing today, is that at Paula Abdul, Tone Loc, and Information Society, they all augmented their performances with backing tracks as well.
Right.
The only band that played live every single performance was Not Was, performers of Walk the Dinosaur.
Yeah.
Which, That's the coolest thing. Also, their names, David Weiss and Don, I don't know their last name. They're David and Don, and their stage names are just David Was and Don Was. Yeah. These guys didn't give a fuck. These guys embodied the mentality of the 1980s one-hit wonder. And they're a two-hit wonder.
What's their other song?
Starlight, Stardust, it's something like that. They had I don't know it. Walk the Dinosaur is what I know from them. But they had another song that performed just as well that was released a few months later.
Fucking wild.
It's just this crazy thing.
But they knew the idea of get in, get out. Like some people are meant to be in this biz, some meant are just to visit.
Well, the direct thing about the tour, David Weiss went on to say, the kind of audience that the Club MTV tour, the bands attract, they don't care if the people are performing or not.
Yeah.
So it's just an interesting. I didn't realize that I could learn so much about the world from Walk the Dinosaur. And another thing is Jason Isaacs' Sliding Doors show was called Awake. That's from 2 episodes ago that we touched on that.
Yep.
And that just came up in other stuff that I was researching. Was that this was a show that would have done a lot better if it had come out 5 years later.
Yeah, well, and it's weird. It would have been a show that would have done better 5 years later because it's the exact kind of show that a Hulu or a Netflix would pick up and at least guarantee it a season, right? Or even Amazon Prime. I think it would find, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So a streaming service would have done justice to that kind of show in a way that network just couldn't. It was the kind of sci-fi that I hate saying you had to watch the whole thing to get it, because that's not what I really mean. But that story is a full story, and getting it in bits and pieces week by week is just not the way that a story like that can survive. And I don't know the words for this, but we know that it's true because we saw the rise of certain types of shows with streaming, and we've talked about how sometimes the week-to-week method that gets experimented with kind of doesn't work with some of them and does with others. I don't know. Awake is a weird one for me because I actually know a lot of people that very much enjoyed it and were very. It was one of those that when it got canceled, everybody was like, "Oh, they only cancel shows that everybody's watching." The same thing that people say about Firefly. But we all know damn well nobody was watching them at the time they were actually on TV, right?
Yeah, I mean that show, I was really into it, but the family wasn't. So we just stopped watching it because of that. And I'm I'll keep watching, but I didn't. Because
I will say the other thing about Awake specifically is it was at a time where I do believe it was doing the Thursday night premiere, Friday on Hulu thing. And I think part of the problem that a lot of people would cite is that they felt like a lot of people are watching this show, but they're not watching it on TV. They're waiting till it goes up on Hulu to watch it. And at the time, it was very unclear whether or not those numbers were mattered to anybody. So I think that the wives' tale about it, again, I have no idea of proving any of this, but I believe the theory at the time was it's a show that everybody's watching, but the numbers don't reflect that because nobody's watching it the night that it premieres. And is this going to be a problem going forward with good television? If everybody's into it, they're just watching it on their own via Hulu or whatever service the next day. And like I said, we just, it's because, especially early on, we just had no idea how those numbers were being tracked and whether or not that mattered, right? The idea of a show that was premiering on one day and then was up on streaming the next was so foreign and new to us that we were concerned about those kinds of things. Well, now, I think we know that those numbers are also considered.
I mean, the big issue with that is also from the production side of it. They didn't know how to monetize the next day on Hulu of it all. Yeah. It was just, do you want to buy advertising on Hulu? So you might get advertising that is not really related to this show, where on broadcast, the type of people who are looking to market during that type of show. Yeah. And also historically, even though people are watching, if they can't get advertisers for those shows, that's why they get canceled. There's a production side and there's a viewer side to it. And it's an interesting one. And you talk about all that. if I were doing Awake for like a streaming service, I would release season 1 and it would just be him in the world where his wife survived. And then season 2 would be the world where his son survived. And you could track like when he went to sleep and when he goes in there. So you see how he like, I think like that would be a cool thing that you could do. Kind of like what
Netflix split.
Yeah. The Disappearance of Eleanor Rigby, right? Is the big movie that did that.
But the Netflix split of the first 5 episodes drop, and then 3 months later they drop the other 5.
Yeah.
So that way people aren't waiting a whole God knows how long until season 2 comes out. But that idea of dividing it in that way, because you know you're going to get the whole story out there, you can take much more creative liberties in that direction, right?
And I think that would be an interesting way, because one of the reasons why my father didn't like the show was he never knew which universe he was in. Because it was like subtle stuff. Like he'd wear the same clothes, but his tie would be a different color. And that shit, I eat that shit up. There's an episode of Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip where the only way you can tell if you're in the past is based on the clothes that they're wearing. And it's like one of my favorite episodes of television ever. So, like, I get it. But it is just something. But it was called Awake. We didn't know the name of it a couple of weeks ago, and I wanted to fill it out. And then my last order of business, and then we can get to the episode proper, is actually related to something that came up in our latest episode of the Adam Sandler Cinematic Universe. That drops on Fridays. We just looked at Murder Mystery, one of Adam's Netflix originals, and the second time that he's worked with Jennifer Aniston, and really like the breakout, standout performance he gets to do with Jennifer Aniston. But listening to the episode, we go into that more. Something that we touched on in that episode was that there was a lot more church background in Adam Sandler's movies from the 90s as opposed to going forward. And it made me think of a complaint that came up a lot while we were in college, right? And that was, how are you supposed to make friends after school? And I realized that church was how people made friends as adults, like until we became godless heathens.
Well, I mean, so you're talking about the idea that church is a built community that you can very easily slip in and out of. It's a very easy way to duck in and out of a social group of some kind, by if you want to be involved in more social with the people in your area, you get involved in whatever church they're in, and that's just, I mean, like that's how churches kind of keep people. It's part of the reason why so many people were so quick to leave the church once like certain events occurred, like, say when a bunch of priests started getting arrested in the 2000s. It was very easy for people to just be like, nah, I'm done, because it was basically, this community no longer is the community I want it to be, and that was the only reason they were there. So it's the way that people make friends, but it's also the way that a lot of people get very ostracized. It's a tightrope.
Yeah, but I connected it because a lot of my friends who ended up not going to college found religion, and I could never really like track the correlation there, but like they joined a church to have a social network. Yeah. And like, I mean, that's fine.
I'm secret, Dev. That's why we all do anything.
Yeah, I guess that's
just to reach out and touch someone,
I guess I don't understand that. I'm fine doing things on my own. I have you, I have Will in Australia, and that's enough for me. That kind of covers the globe. There's a blind spot in the Pacific, but it's not that big. But yeah, so those are just things that like have come up and have been in my mind related to old episodes of the show that I wanted to touch on just to clean up. Plus, it gives you time to acclimate. And now that we're acclimated, Sejohn, how you been, buddy? What you been up to?
Pretty good, man. It's been a wild week here in old Utah. I told you guys a couple weeks ago about the smoke that we were having, and it just sat around. And then I don't know if that led to, or if that in conjunction to that, we just had the wettest week we've had this year and in a few years. So it's been like raining like crazy, to the point where like internet and electricity has now been a problem for a lot of people, including yours truly. But we're fine. We're good. Of course, also, it doesn't rain much in Utah. ideally rains a little bit more than it had been this year up until this week. But it doesn't rain much, right? So about 3-4 weeks ago, came out to find that the back window of my car had slipped off of its track, essentially, and so the glass is like down in the car door. And I thought, well, that's a bummer. I'm gonna have to get that fixed. But I live in Utah, so I've got time before I have to worry about that. And then boom, the next week is thunder and lightning central. So of course, this is like the worst rain that they've had in years, and it's less than a week after my window broke.
So you got one of those new indoor swimming pool cars I've been reading about in People magazine?
I have been clearing out the garage every chance I get to then like slip my car inside. But the garage is not huge. But also on top of that, I drive a Mitsubishi Galant. Anybody that knows anything about that car, it's a fucking boat. So, so like I slip it into the garage, and then I have to squeeze out the side and then leave through the garage door and come back in the front door of my house. I can't use the garage, like the inside garage door, because I can't get around my car to it.
Thank you for that imagery, Sejohn. It's exactly what I needed at this moment in time.
Yeah. So that's like, so I've been dealing with that and the internet not being great and things like that. So like weirdly, I've been trying to, I don't know why, I guess it made it stick in my head that like I really wanted to be doing a lot of online stuff this week. So like I've reinstalled Steam on my computer, and I actually did a bunch of cleanup work so I could get some things downloaded. I've been diving back into some stuff that I had like kind of started and not really ever gone too far with. I've been playing a ton of Human Fall Flat, as an example. Have you checked that out at all from Curve Digital?
No.
It's a 5-year-old game at this point, but it's one of those games that the programmers for it, they just consistently just keep dropping more stuff for it. So like the last update I think was late last year. They put out a whole other level set and a whole bunch of silly shit to do. But the whole thing is it's a physics game. Like it's a physics based ragdoll game with like a little bit of like a small amount of QWOP controls to it. Okay. So the idea is like everything obeys pretty solid, understandable physics. The only thing is that your character is basically a ragdoll, and the only way that it can get around is that you can use the left bumper and the right bumper to grab onto things, and depending on where your camera's looking depends on where the hand will grab, right? So you've got to get really used to like looking at a box and grabbing with your right, and then looking at the button and walking over to it, and then using your left to grab and flip. And anybody that's ever played like those kinds of games, like QWOP or what's the one where you play the Grim Reaper and he lets you come back, but you have to like control every aspect of your body, including like breathing.
Trying to think of the name of that one. Fred, right?
Yeah. Like there's a series of those. Octodad is very much in this vein too, right? Like so anybody who's played any of those games for a second knows how frustrating they can be, and that's actually supposedly part of the fun with them is like the rage game concept, and I'm not about that. Like that's just not. Mm-hmm. So I think when I first got hold of this game, way back in the day, I was just the second I saw that was part of the concept, I was kind of already turned off, and I don't know why. But like over the last few years, seeing different like Twitch streamers play it and people just kind of joke about it and have some fun in it, I finally was like, all right, I'm going to try this, because obviously it's not too difficult. Like I've seen enough people play it now that I kind of understand that the controls are not as crazy as like an Octodad. And sure enough, the thing is a fucking blast. It's a sandbox. So there's like a line of puzzles in front of you when you get there, and it could be something like just put this box on this button, or it could be something like, hey, you have to move this truck up the road, collect coal. I put parentheses around it, these little black things that like are coal, but nothing has like actual shape in this game. Mm-hmm. And then you have to drive it back down the hill and put it in the furnace and light it. And it sounds like it's like an insane task, but there's like this whole element to it where you realize like, oh, but if I drive the truck to this position, I can actually then climb up the mountain the rest of the way and just throw the coal down, and that's even easier than driving the stupid truck the whole way. So there's like little workarounds for everything, to the point where there's like achievements for finding like shortcuts and things like that. That's just like it's become part of that game, is to find out how to not bother with the puzzle in front of you, but to do like a million other things instead. And so it's just been a blast just like doing like achievement hunting and that. The other thing about it is that it's so it's so easy and so pleasant that like I can play it while I work. Like I can get on the phone with a customer, do my job, my call-in job, and then between calls when nobody's calling, easily just shift back to it and get back into it really quick. So like there's just such an ease to it. So I've been doing like a ton of that, right? I've played through a bunch of the SteamWorld games because they were all up on Pro Stadia a couple of months back, and so I got all of them then. So I've been playing that. Paw Patrol went up this week on Stadia. By the way, Dev, did you see that?
No, I have been distracted with my own game stuff, and we'll get to that. I do need to log into Stadia and claim the Pro stuff though, and that doesn't surprise me about Paw Patrol because the movie just dropped yesterday, and I'm very excited to watch it. I haven't had the time.
I was wondering why, of all games, they put up Paw Patrol, but I forgot that the movie was coming out this summer. Man, Paw Patrol is one of those things where I feel like by the time I was aware of it, I was already late to the game for like, you know, kids being into that sort of shit. And then here we are years later where now there's a video game and a movie. So like, are they super late to that, or is Paw Patrol still like fucking huge?
Paw Patrol is huge. Paw Patrol has only gotten bigger. Unfortunately, in the wake of all of the police officer violence last summer, there was a big resurgence because of that rumor that they got rid of the police dog. So the type of people who like fuck the Democrats and all lives matter, like those type of people.
Yes,
they
people
became
that cancel culture. Exists. Yeah.
They're the people who like went out and breathed new life into Paw Patrol as a property. And it was already something that, like, it wasn't coals that needed to be stoked. It was already something that was popular. Yeah. But that injection of people like, well, I'm going to support Paw Patrol. My kid's going to watch Paw Patrol. I need to go get the police dog from Paw Patrol, all the merchandise that's available. And, like, not spoilers or anything like that, but really the merchandise focuses on the fireman dog and the police officer dog because that's what kids really gravitate to. The like recycler dog, who I'm convinced that his father is a mobster. This is my own personal headcanon. I'm not real ready to talk about the conspiracy theory, but I do believe that he comes from a dog mafia family, and that he is a recycler to try to make up for the evils that his father puts into the world. Those don't really get a lot of merchandising, but the firefighter and the police officer dog do. So then when they put this like rumor out there that they were going to cancel Chase, that's his name, people went out and made sure that they scooped up as much merchandise as possible, and it really did reinvigorate this series to the fact that, well, we'll do a movie next year. The game had already released, but because the movie's coming, it got like more interest in it, and I think they ported it to a bunch of new systems.
The game strikes me as like a swing at some Avengers style, like now we're superheroes style marketing, shall we say?
I mean that's the reason.
All these things are just more marketing for you to go out and buy more toys. But yeah, it feels like there's a little bit of that element to the game. So you saying it's a few years old at this point makes sense.
But it also is one of those things, like one of the ways that Paw Patrol has stayed relevant and something that kids care about is they do chase trends with it. And, you know, it's already the team-based thing, right? It's Power Rangers, it's Voltron, it's 6 dogs, and each of them represent a different type of thing. But again, really, Marshall the fire dog and Chase the police dog are the two big popular ones. And then you have, like, I'm the dog in a hovercraft. And then there's the female dog, Sky, and she has a helicopter. And then there's Rocky the construction dog. And then there's the recycling dog. And those are like the main 6. So like that already builds itself to be like very good in marketing. But then when you have 6 characters like that, it's pretty easy to turn those 6 dogs into the Avengers in dog form.
Yeah, right.
So they're willing to do that. They've gone this space. The Paw Patrol have done fucking basically everything. Nice. So it's one of those situations where now that we have this spotlight on us, if we do a movie, we will probably make twice as much money as if we did it before.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't think they expected the pandemic to still go on. However, they are being smart. I hate giving marketing credit, especially like how much we critique marketing on this, but it's kind of a smart decision to try to drive numbers to Paramount Plus by saying the Paw Patrol movie is free if you have Paramount Plus. And that's an $8 a month subscription.
Well, Jesus. Any parent right now that has any, like, concern about going out to a theater, then there you go.
Dude, any parent out there whose kid is like, I want to see the Paw Patrol movie, is gonna pay the $8 to get Paramount Plus. I actually think it's $10. I think it's $9.99. They recently raised the price.
I didn't, and I wasn't considering the idea that it's not just a one-time deal, right? Because if they get Paramount Plus, then that kid can do what every kid always does with kids' movies and watch it 10 times a week.
Exactly. And then those numbers will drive. And also, I'm talking about the 10, that's commercial free. There's a ad version of Paramount Plus. And if it's just the kids, parents would probably just go for the cheapest option to get their kids to shut up about wanting to see the Paw Patrol movie. And then also all the other entertainment that's on there. You get the new SpongeBob movie. I feel like I'm a fucking shill for Paramount Plus right now. But it's just one of those things that they're smart to look at. Well, we wanted to get eyes on Paw Patrol. That's why we decided to do a movie after 8 years of Paw Patrol. Yeah. And it might even be more than that. But like, I think it's something like 8 years of the show. And then when they're like, oh, fuck, well, people aren't going out to movies. Well, we'll drop it on Paramount Plus. We'll see the money. It will work. Because also, parents will get that subscription, and then they won't cancel it.
Yeah.
Because it's like an inconsequential amount of money that you just forget about. I mean, which is really the whole marketing strategy of the subscription streaming thing. Like you mentioned Stadia. I've been paying for Stadia. I don't think I use Stadia every month. And I certainly don't use Amazon Luna, but Jeff Bezos gets my $6 every month for that. I like to think that it goes directly to him. And he knows, like, this is Devon's $6. He's going to save them all up and buy himself a hoverboard. Get my face stenciled on the wheels.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where the problem is that you do that with enough services, and you're right. You don't think about it, $6 here, $8 there, but then suddenly the next thing you know, you realize you're paying $60 a month for all of this, and you're like, well, why did I cancel cable?
Right.
So like, I'm just, it's not like that, you said you're worried about being a shill for that stuff. Like, let's take a moment here to remind everybody about the evils of this shit. Is like, it's built that way on purpose. It's built to make you realize that what you're actually doing is exactly what you always were doing. Yeah, man. So
but I don't know. Paramount Plus is one of my favorite ones. I don't want to be like a thing like I like the CBS shows, and they've always been notoriously bad with putting their stuff online. So the fact that it is all available there, it works for me. It makes my parents happy too. They can watch Blue Bloods whenever. Sorry, continue.
Oh, I mean, like that's been a lot of my week, is a lot of like prepping the house for whatever nonsense has been going on around here storm-wise, and then just, when I get a chance, like ducking on and playing some stuff. Got another Stardew game started up after I reinstalled Steam. I was one of the first things I downloaded. I tried running a couple of other things that my computer is just like, I need to start thinking about seriously saving up for a new computer, because there's like games that like I have on Steam that there's no reason why my computer should not be able to run them. Like they're 10, 15-year-old games. There's no reason why they should be hitchy and things like that.
Are you trying to run Crysis, Sejohn?
No, like fucking Bloody Trapland is like one that I really wanted to get back into. It's like a Super Meat Boy-esque style platformer. Really punishing, but really the point is that it's really quick turnaround. The second you die, you respawn, so you can just fucking like brute force the thing essentially. And super fun, and you can play it online with friends and things like that. And it is nothing. It's like the art quality and all of that stuff. Like, it's not like it's not a 3D space. It's not there's not ray tracing in this game or any of that shit. Like, there's no reason why it should not be running smooth on a computer that I just need a new computer.
Oh, I get that. I'm surprised at the stuff my computer can run. But then, like, I talked to my friends about wanting a new computer, and they're like, you play 8-bit games, Devon. They were released in 2021, but you play 8-bit games. And I'm like, good point. I guess I'm the asshole, but you're not wrong. I can't tell you that you're wrong. It's just, like, Cyber Shadow, when I was speed running that game, I had gotten into, like, frame rates on the monitor, because if you were running at like 144 or higher, you had an advantage. So like being in races and things, you needed that to get that edge. And then I realized that, like, well, I want my computer to be the best possible in case I decide to race some games someday.
Yeah, I'm not looking to do any. That's what I mean, though. It's like I'm not looking to do that, right? So I thought I was okay with the device that I had, but I'm not. I don't know. And what's weird is, like, things are like chugging along, and things are like getting really hitchy, and running at like 2 frames a second, right? So like, and there's no reason for that. So I check like my CPU usage and all that, and I'm only using 20% or 27%. So there's no excuse for it to be acting that way. So I don't know. I've got to look into it. She's no girl. I've had this thing longer than we've been recording the show. It's what we started recording on back when I had just a Rock Band mic plugged into the front of this thing.
That's how what?
That's how we did it.
I had no idea.
When I was like sitting in a closet. Yeah, man. So you sent me that nice I got the snowball. I bought the snowball on your recommendation, and then at one point you sent me the blue, and that's what I now use.
I actually think the girls got you to blue. I just they contacted me with like, what microphone should we get for Sejohn for your show?
Yeah, but yeah, so like the upgrade there, much appreciated on all parts. Yeah. But yeah, man, when we first started, the first couple of first year or less than that of this show, I was literally sitting in a broom closet in an apartment in BG with just a Rock Band mic hooked up to this computer that at that point was already a year old.
Wow. From humble beginnings. I had no idea. That is the coolest thing. The coolest thing is that I had no idea. And now we're where we are now. I'm gonna leap off the video game conversation you started, because I have some stuff about video games I'd like to talk about, if and you'll allow it, son.
I think we can talk about video games this week. It's a rarity on the show, but let's do it.
No, I mean, we're gonna talk about some other stuff too, but so first of all, the first thing that I want to talk about is It Takes Two, because this has the potential to be a long discussion topic or a short discussion topic, depending on your answer to this. Do you want to try It Takes Two with me, and then we can discuss it on the show together?
I definitely do want to still try it. I have to be entirely honest. I know you don't want to go too deep into it because we're going to play it, but like from what I have heard about your experience with that game not being too favorable, that might be the only negative thing I have heard about that game. I have heard some people be like fucking ecstatic about it, and I've heard a couple people say it was good, but I've not heard a negative thing about it until I heard about you and Dale's experience with it. So I definitely want to try it, because now more than anything I'm morbidly curious.
Good, that's fine. So It Takes Two will come someday on the show. We said we were going to talk about some trilogy picture, and I feel like that's going to be lost to time. We'll circle back to it at some point, but It Takes Two, Sejohn and I will find the time to play it, and then we will talk about it on the show. Because you're not wrong, it is one of those things that like everybody seems to universally enjoy it, and I have no idea like why our playthrough of it hit us the way that it did. And again, we'll elaborate at that time, because it is burned into my mind just how weirdly It Takes Two affected myself, and more specifically Dale. She was very upset with that game. Like, she got mad at me when I'm like, you're being hyperbolic. And she's like, no, this is my real level of anger at the game.
I guess my question at that point is, why would you guys continue to play a game that you guys were not enjoying that much?
and I have to say, the story, which is also not great, but it morbidly hooked us. And I think that's enough of a like little splash screen trailer for the fact that we are going to play It Takes Two, and then we will talk about it. I don't know if we'll stream it or anything like that, but it'll come here. I think one of the main reasons, though, like just to float a theory, is that Dale and I do a lot of co-op games. So then coming to It Takes Two, we had, I guess, some expectation for what it was supposed to be or what it would be, and it really didn't do the co-op stuff as well as I had hoped. And I think it's the same for Dale. So we'll see. I'm excited. I'm like, here's the thing. After finishing it, I'm like, now that I know the lay of the land, I have no problem jumping back into this game. But after that first level, when I sent you the message, like, we're not going to play this game together, like, I know why I sent that message.
Okay.
Is this cryptic enough? I feel like this is all the crypticism in the world.
More than anything, the thing that surprised me is I mean, you're talking about a game that had a 90% on Metacritic for a while. I think it's only fallen down by 2 points. I think it's at 88% now, but for a long time it had a full-on 90% on Metacritic, which, like, is just unheard of in the day of, like, you know, trolls and assholes out there who tank any game that they can. Like, the idea that it was able to maintain that and has still maintained that is, like, the story about that game that, like, I know. And, like, you know, I am fascinated because the number of people I have talked to in real life and read on the internet that have been enjoying themselves with that game was a fair amount. Like, you know, like, and like, I'm not saying it's going to take home like Game of the Year award type shit, but for a lot of people, what the story has been about that game is, you know, in the time of COVID, we started to realize how, you know, how much we didn't really have couch co-op anymore. We didn't have these kinds of games anymore. And then this came along, and it was so great to be able to have a game that was dedicated to me and a partner being with each other as we played it at this time in our lives, you know, and like, and so I think some of the warm and fuzzies people are feeling about it are definitely tied to the time and place in which it is being played. So maybe that will be part of it, but yeah, I'm just more fascinated by the fact that not only did you guys not like it, but there was just like an active dislike that you were like, I can't play this game with you. I was like, okay, like, that's fine. Like, I don't want to force you to play a game you don't want to play, man.
Right, but I'm curious to see what would happen, and I also I'd like to give you the opportunity to develop your own opinion on it before we address it.
Yeah.
But don't worry, I have all of my current thoughts. They're in a little shoebox underneath my bed, and I have no problem going into that shoebox after we get a chance to play it. So then, I guess the second game I want to talk about is Avengers and the War for Wakanda expansion that dropped. But again, do you have any intention to try that before I talk to you about it?
At some point, but this is not one that you should wait for me on. Okay. We should talk about this.
So this is what the game should have been when it released, is the first thing that I want to say about Avengers War for Wakanda. And I don't mean that Black Panther should have been there. I think that Black Panther makes sense as the first downloadable character. Like, even like Hawkeye should have been in the base game, right?
Right.
As much as I like Kate Bishop and all of that, I would have been fine with her being DLC. But then, like, the main year 2 DLC, like, the craziest thing about Avengers is that it's not even a year old yet. Yeah. And I've had so much interaction with it about how it's changed.
Out of anger that we're talking about this, I punched my mic.
That's completely fine. It's just, it's one of those situations where, like, Hawkeye shows up a bunch in the story, and it actually feels weird that he didn't come along until the second DLC. And even then, the Kate Bishop Hawkeye DLCs felt like one complete campaign that they carved up so that they could release something in order to save a struggling player base, right?
Right.
But it seems like they knew that Black Panther was going to be a big deal, so they made sure to refine a lot of it. If you had to name one of your biggest complaints about the Avengers game, what would you say that it is?
I mean, I guess the developing of characters, like gaining experience and stuff for my characters, like that loop, the loot loop, felt like it was more of a punishment than a prize.
All right. Well, the loot loop is still a punishment. It was halfway through this year that I figured out how it actually works. And then realized how to exploit it. And Dale and I played through the Black Panther content together, and I'm like, this is what you have to do in order to get better loot. It's don't upgrade your loot. Just anytime you collect something with a higher number, put it on your character. Because however, whatever the lowest number that an item started at is on your character, it adds 10 to the stuff that you find in the world. So even if you find a gold thing that's like level 20, after you level it up, you're never going to find anything higher than level 30 if you keep using that.
That's how those games work, Dev. That's Destiny. That's
yeah, I know. But I didn't know that. I'll be the first person to admit that.
Okay, I will say, knowing that the 10 level window, that's good. Like behind the scenes, how the sausage is made information to have. But as far as you should always just be equipping the highest number thing, even if you get a higher number thing that is a silver over a high level gold that you have, you should still equip the higher number. Yes, that is the whole thing, and that's the big complaint in games like Destiny. Like, this is not just an Avengers problem. This is the MMORPG issue that they've had for a while, is that there are people out there that work and work and work to grind their shit out when say Black Panther comes out, and people are going to work and work and work and grind up the best level shit that they can in this, and then the second the next DLC comes out, they're now going to raise the level caps on a bunch of things, and there's going to be a whole bunch of shitty gear that's still going to be better than the gear that they spent all their time leveling up this time around. It breaks that sense of ownership that you had over an item that you spent all that time with. You know, that bullshit when Destiny was first coming out, where they were like, every item you own is going to have a personal story. It's going to mean something to you. You're not going to want to get rid of this gun because you worked to get it. And then the game came out, and that was the loot system, and everybody was just like, well, yeah, this fucking sucks, man. You made that sound like that was going to be a feature, but that's not a feature. That's a problem. That's a bug.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. But like I said, knowing the 10 level window there is good to know.
Right. Well, I mean, so for me, I always thought that the items you would find in the world would have scaled off of your character level, because it was so hard to level up characters in the beginning of Avengers.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it took time to level up characters. And then they changed that because really all the levels do is unlock stuff in your skill tree. It is not related to the loot at all. The loot is what determines the loot. And then the big thing that I found was, oh, well, I'm okay keeping on these gamma gauntlets that, like, let me kill stuff really quickly, because they started at 20, but I was able to level them up to 35, right? Because that's the other thing, is that the color really just tells you how much more you can raise it.
Right.
But then I'm only finding stuff that's at level 30. I'm never finding stuff higher than that. And then when it's like, oh yeah, if you upgrade gear, that doesn't change the slider for the gear.
That's crazy.
And I'm just like, well, why would I have ever thought that wasn't the case? And then it really just became a matter of doing that. And then I was able to find, level 140 gear that does give me the gamma attack and makes my character act the way I want them to act. So I still have that ownership over it, but not, like, as soon as I found out, don't level up your gear, it's a waste of your fucking time and resources.
Not until you have the highest level gear in the game.
Right.
Yeah.
And even then, it's just so strange. But like, once that happened for me, it changed how I approached the Avengers game. So that's you're not wrong. The loot loop, right? I guess that's what you would call it, is not good in Avengers, and they haven't fixed it. But my main complaint is the UI. Like, when you pause and you have 8 different pages to go through in order to figure out your character and what you're doing as your character.
Yep.
That's no good.
Yes.
And they have changed that.
That's great.
When you pause, everything that you care about, like all of your gears on the front page, all of your challenges are on the front page. And that's nice. You can modify your costume from that page. Skills are on that page. It works. And I'm very happy. It's not something that should have come along 11 months after the game released. But it does feel like a completely different game, because I'm not bashing my head against the wall when I pause to try to figure out what's next.
Yeah.
And
that's good to know. I mean, that is definitely something that affected my stuff. But like we talked about, even just some basic quality of life stuff, like the fact that some cutscenes had a fixed camera for where it was going to focus in no matter what character you had. So if you were in a cutscene with Cap or Thor, then that fixed camera was most likely focused on their head. But if you were in that same cutscene with, say, the Hulk, suddenly you were just staring at his crotch at like integral moments of story development, where it was just like, oh, I'm supposed to be seeing emotion on Bruce's face right now, but instead I'm just looking at his pants. Thanks, guys. Like, that really makes me love the story of this game that I'm apparently supposed to be super invested in.
Which is why, and I don't love this, Cap is pretty much the only Avenger who's in every single challenge of the Black Panther DLC. He's always there, and so he always gets to be a focal point.
Yeah.
So they solved that problem, but not in the way you'd think.
Yeah,
but
that's that's the stuff that was bugging me, is the loot loop is punishing in a way that is not fun, and like basic shit in the game feels like it still is quote unquote broken. Now, since the release of Avengers, we have had a much more actually broken game in Cyberpunk that has come out.
Yeah.
So when people were talking about how broken Avengers was, that talk got real quiet real quick when we realized what an actual broken game looks like when it's released. Because I don't think that what's happening in Avengers is the game breaking in any way. I think it's that they straight up rushed to development and didn't look for these minor things. That's what this game's always felt like to me.
Yeah.
Is just rush to development the game.
And that hasn't gone away. And one of the bug lists it mentions, so Tony, right? You would imagine that if he's talking to T'Challa, he'd lift up his face mask and meet his eyes.
Yes.
So they put that in there, right? So he has his mask up, but then underneath his mask is just another Iron Man mask.
Now, come on now.
And
really?
It is hilarious. And I'm like, oh, maybe it's just this outfit that I have on. So I switched to a different outfit. Same issue. And it's known, and they mentioned it in the patch notes. We are aware of the double face mask Iron Man. It has not been addressed in this patch. It's like, well, at least they know, right? Like,
see, and that's the thing, is the other thing about Avengers, when it is actually broken, it always breaks in very humorous, silly ways. So like Iron Man having a double face mask, or that time that I did an entire boss fight as the Hulk in slow motion because I happened to perform a move right as it went into a slow-mo scene and couldn't get out of it. And so I spent the entire boss fight. Remember that? I think you were on headset with me that night. And I was just like, this boss fight is taking 20 minutes and it should have taken 2. Like,
well, I mean, every boss fight takes 20 minutes. The fact that, I mean, the main villain is Claw in the War for Wakanda stuff, and it's much more in line with his comic counterpart. They tell that story very well. But they also introduce Crossbones as just a mercenary that Claw has hired in it. So the final boss fight of the campaign is against Crossbones and mutated Claw.
Okay.
And it's so good. Like, it's one of the best characterizations that they've been able to nail in the Avengers game, because halfway through the fight, they each have their own life bars and everything. And basically, you have to fight Crossbones in order to lower a shield to, like, blow up turrets that are attacking the main city of Wakanda. But then once all those turrets are gone, it's a little cutscene, and Crossbones is like, this is getting too rich for my blood, and he just pieces out of there. And I'm like, that was Crossbones. That was Crossbones right there. I'm here for the money, and when the job gets too hard, I'ma still hope your check clears. Deuces.
Yeah. Oh, man.
It's good, but the game is still not better, and I would be very surprised if we see anything after the Black Panther content. I think we're still going to see the Spider-Man stuff that they talked about as being exclusive for PlayStation.
Well, I was going to say, because PlayStation's basically financially invested in that.
Right.
Like, they're not, if they don't do Spider-Man, it's not just like Crystal Dynamics that's dealing with the brunt of the financial issues there. That's also going to be PlayStation's going to have something to answer for.
Yeah. So I think that's probably going to be the last one. But again, it's an exclusive just to PlayStation. So we'll see what happens with that. But I don't I don't expect there to be much more for this Avengers game. I think that they got Guardians of the Galaxy coming out in October, which is, it kind of looks like what they originally wanted this game to be before it turned into a live service.
Important to remember that is a completely different studio and group like making that. Like it's not Crystal Dynamics making the game they always meant to make, right? Like isn't it one of Square's other?
Yeah, it's a different studio, but I still look at that game, and when I hear that it's only single player and everything else that I hear about the game, it's like I feel like this is what they wanted Avengers to be.
Yeah.
Like then they're like, well, we'll do that for the Guardians of the Galaxy game. This is going to be our live service baby. And then it didn't do well, so then they did Outriders, which still hasn't made a profit. I don't know if you saw that on Twitter this week.
Yeah, Outriders is weird. I know a lot of people that are playing Outriders that like are, despite a lot of its issues, really enjoying it. So like, I want to give that game a fair shake. It's one of those games where if it had come out 20 years ago and it was a B-tier game, like people would probably be gushing about it. You know, if it was like a THQ Nordic property that had come out alongside like the Darksiders, funny enough. But you know, that level of game is what it feels like, and there's not a place in the dialogue right now for that level of game that people have to either love a game or hate it.
I mean, it's not just love a game or hate it. It's if you're gonna ape the big dog and that game is aping Destiny, you have to be better than the big dog.
I mean, the thing about it that I understand is there's a lot of people that are enjoying it more than Destiny right now because Destiny is dying on the vine. Yeah. So say what you will about that. And that's even that's a big comment to make without anything to really back it up. But I'm getting real sick of these big games as service things. Surprise, even though we've all been saying it since day one when this shit came around, like this stuff's just not as fun as older video games. Like I want to go back to, like where's God of War? Where's the next God of War? Where's
delayed to 2022?
Yeah, when's the next? Like I guess Horizon Zero is supposed to be like a series that really should fill that gap for me, right? I should definitely. I should
start playing Horizon Zero Dawn. We've both said that on the show multiple times, and I haven't started, and I really have to. That needs to be something that I start in September. But all these little games have come out that like I have some investment in, which is the last game that I wanted to talk about this week, and that's Axiom Verge 2.
Yeah.
Which I don't know why you call a game Axiom Verge 2 if it's nothing like the first game.
Okay.
I feel like a vocal minority here, and it's I mean, let's talk about something outside of it. Let's go metagame with Axiom Verge 2 for a second. We talked about Streets of Rage 4 in April of last year, and how there was the 2-week embargo for submitting anything to the leaderboard, right? And so there was a lot of talk about this is an interesting thing, and why we're doing it is so that people can get to know the game before they start to run the game, and all of these other issues, right? It was a whole discourse that we discussed. Axiom Verge 2 is doing the same thing. We're not allowing anything to be submitted to the leaderboards for 2 weeks, but they added a wrinkle to it that is interesting to me as somebody, like, I'm not a capital S speedrunner, right? I sometimes speedrun games for fun.
Right.
There's also an embargo on discussing strategies. They don't want anyone to share strategies in, like, the official Discord for the Axiom Verge speedrunning community. They want people to develop their own strategies.
I mean, fuck that. There are Discord servers already that exist that they don't have any.
Exactly.
They can't. That's just not going to happen. They're not going to be able to.
Dude, I mean, and people are already on. It's not like it's not an embargo on streaming. So you stream, you watch somebody else, and then you borrow tech that looks good or not. Yeah. Like it's just the weirdest thing in the world to me. A discussion of like no sharing strategies between each other, gentlemen's rules, We're not going to enforce it very highly, but like try to develop your own strategies. But then in 2 weeks, everybody's just going to be using the strategies, aren't they? Like, what is that stopping?
I mean, that sounds like more than anything is the creators of that game just kind of announcing that they have a disdain for speedrun culture. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's all that they're doing is just pointing out that this thing that happens in speedrunning communities all the time is something we don't agree with and would rather didn't happen with this game. And it's like, too bad. You don't get to... You're not in charge of that. Like, that's not your thing to control.
Well, okay, so I don't know if Thomas Happ is involved, and it's just the creator, because Axiom Verge, historically, just the one guy did it. And I'm fairly certain it's still just the one guy who did Axiom Verge 2, maybe with some more backing behind it. But yeah. It's not the official Axiom Verge thing. It's the official speedrunning channel, right? So Axiom Verge is a 6-year-old game. And then, yes, there are other Discords out there, but there is one that, like, this is where you go to discuss right. Axiom Verge.
So this is, I'm sorry, so just to
This is
clarify,
just a community policing
this is the
itself.
actual community
putting
this
policing
out there?
itself, yes.
What? Why?
What is to gain of that, right? What? That's a hell of a community where you guys can't discuss this game for 2 weeks. Go play on your own and then bring your whatever you found.
And this isn't like a know-nothing game that, like, everybody's, like, surprised came out and now we're all, like, suddenly talking about it. This is Axiom Verge 2. This is a game that, like, people have been anticipating. Like, there would have been discussions on possible strategies going up to it. So, like, to say stop talking about this game is a weird fucking move.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't get it at all. And it's something that, like, first of all, Axiom Verge 2, have you played Axiom Verge? Just before we go any further into this?
Not well, but yes.
Yeah. Okay, but you've played it. If you had to, like, name a big... What defines Axiom Verge to you as a game? What is something, when you think of Axiom Verge, this is what you think of?
I mean... I guess, I don't know, like, hardcore and like, platforming, right? Like...
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Like those are like, I find it to be a game that is hard for the sake of being hard. Not exactly like a bullet hell, but like it feels like it's got that same kind of feel to it, where like it's gonna punish you if you don't do things right. But it's not that. But there is a right way to do things. You know what I mean? So I don't know the right word for that. But I guess
tough but fair. Is sort of like that.
Yeah, but it's tough but fair, and platforming would, I guess, be the two big things that I think about that game.
You know what I really like about that? Those are not the things that I considered when thinking about that game, but you're not wrong. And the tough but fair part is definitely there, but Axiom Verge 2 is so much more forgiving than than like its predecessor. It's one of those situations where, like, the only progress you lose when you die is however far you got. Yeah, if you collected stuff, you still have that stuff.
That's a tough one for me, man, because as somebody that is, like, traditionally not great at those games, like, that feels like that makes it more approachable for me. But I can definitely see how, if somebody dedicated a lot of time and you know, fan power to a game that was like that, it'd be like Dark Souls coming back and being like, you don't die every 5 minutes now. That's just not part of it. We decided to take that part away. And you're just like, wait a minute, what? Like, you've kind of ruined one of the core elements of this game.
Or you still die every 5 minutes, but you don't lose your souls. You hold on to your souls when you die. Well, then there's no reason for me to have to get back to where I was.
Right. There's no fight. There's no there's no drive.
Yeah.
That's a weird one.
And in addition to that, right, they've added accessibility sliders, which honestly I'm all for. I think it's very cool that they've added these sliders where, like, you can dictate how much damage enemies do to you and how much damage you do to enemies, instead of, like, easy, normal, hard. Having it so you can cater the gameplay experience to yourself, that's very cool. It's not something I touched. I didn't know about it till I was done with the game, but knowing that it exists makes, like, I love that accessibility, because if you're a hardcore person, you don't need to touch those sliders, or you turn those sliders up to 11, right? It's all up to you on that. But it's just a thing. But also, like, the big things that I think of with Axiom Verge is the gunplay. The fact that there's like over 20 different styles of guns in that game.
For sure. Yeah.
So for Axiom Verge 2 to have a melee focus, it doesn't feel like an Axiom Verge game.
Weird choices.
Okay. And then the boss fights, like it's these giant, beautiful bosses.
Oh yeah, well the artwork in general, but the bosses and artwork being part of that.
Yeah. There are no classic boss fights, is what I'm going to say. You never walk into a room, have the door slam behind you, and the only way that you're making progress is to defeat this boss.
Oh, okay.
In fact, you don't need to defeat a single boss in order to beat the game.
What? So how is it structured?
It's like purely open world. Like everybody's saying it's an open world Metroidvania, which like all Metroidvanias are open world. The only thing that's blocking your progress is the items that you find.
Right.
So I don't know why, like, it's an open world Metroidvania. It's like, well, that's part of what a Metroidvania is you're exploring a large open world and finding items that help you get to other places.
Yep. Yeah, that's how they've always worked. Like, oh man.
Yeah, so
like, you know, Grand Theft Auto and the
bridges are down until
right. Yeah, until you can do this one quest that brings them down. I mean, the world is there. You just can't access it. You can't access it right now. Oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
That's a weird caveat.
So it is an open world. Everybody's saying it's more of an open world experience. And what it is there are boss like size sprites. There are things that like would have been bosses or were bosses in the last game, but you only need to defeat them if you want to get, like, upgrade points.
Okay. You
don't need to beat them for progress. You can just run under them to the next room.
This is like open world to a detrimental level. It reminds me a lot of the same issues that we talked about you having with Breath of the Wild. The fact that so much of that game is inconsequential because you don't have to do it if you don't want to.
Yeah.
And that there are people that can jump into Breath of the Wild and defeat Ganon in 5 minutes without getting any of the powers, right? Like that sort of shit.
The speed run that I saw is 26 minutes.
For
Axiom Verge 2.
For Axiom Verge 2,
It defeats no bosses. And it has no out-of-bounds tech. Like, it's purely no major glitching. And it impressed me. And after watching it once, I was able to get a 59-minute clear on the game. And that felt pretty good. I'm not going to lie. I enjoyed doing that. But
no
like...
sharing strats, Dev.
What?
No sharing strats.
I'm not on their Discord. But it's one of those situations... Well, I didn't really. I just watched it, and then I tried to do what I saw. I did it by rote. Speedrunning by rote with Devon Decker. Yeah, it just... And I'm never going to go back to it. The speedrun, I did it. It was the last thing I needed to do to get the Platinum Trophy, because I had done 100% everything in my first run-through of the game, which took me about 14 hours. And then I'm like, oh, I have to speedrun, and there's a bunch of challenges to do. But in doing it in 59 minutes, I completed all of the challenges. But the big, like, the lack of guns I'm almost okay with, right? Like, I'm okay with the game sort of changing and trying to be something different on that level. But to eliminate the boss fights from this style game, it boggled my mind.
I mean, it's the classic issue. It's the classic issue at this point of why name it Axiom Verge 2? Would you feel better if this was a different title on this game just made by this creator? And people were like, oh, it's a spiritual successor. And then we could talk about ways in which it may be or it might not be, but at least it's not tied to it, right? We don't have that authorial intent of it meaning to be the sequel of Axiom Verge 2 if you didn't put that name on it. So then we wouldn't feel so weird about it, right? Like...
I mean, it exists in the same sort of universe. Mm-hmm. You do go through the Verge into the Emergence, and all of those other words are used.
Right.
One of the notes you find is from the protagonist of the first game, which is also strange because the big question that people have is, does this take place before or after the events of the first game? And it's like, well, based on the fact that I've been to a bunch of areas from the first game and they're now dilapidated, and there was a note from the protagonist of the first game, kind of makes me think that it's a sequel, and not a secret prequel, which is, I don't know. It's just, it didn't feel like Axiom Verge 2. It didn't feel like that game. But really, the boss thing was very strange to me. Because I don't understand. I don't.
Well, part of it for me is like the way that Axiom Verge was really kind of brought into my scene with, like, into my line of vision was the artwork, right, and the ways in which the one guy working on that game had put so much work into the sprites and all this stuff, and like, look at how beautiful this is and all that. And one of the ways you show that off is traditional, like, boss battle style, right? Like, and seeing some of those sprites and the ways that those characters looked in those boss fights was fucking rad. And so you're right, like that is part of Axiom Verge for me, is like that art, that look, that style, those bosses. So to find that, like, that's not really a focus this time, because you don't have to see that stuff. Like Axiom Verge, the first one, always felt like the kind of game where you were always meant to 110% it, because you really were meant to see every little piece of it. It feels like the mentality is completely flipped on this. Like, if the idea is that you don't have to if you don't want to, it feels like it's so against the concept of, like, no, I put a lot of work into every inch of this game and I want you to see every inch of this game.
Yeah. I mean, it's not that you, hopefully in playing the game you'll come across all of the bosses. It's not so much you don't see them, it's that you don't interact with them. Yeah. And that interaction is really where you come to appreciate the art. I mean, I'll also just say it, I don't feel bad about it. The art in the game is not as good as the first game, and there's a caveat to that. It's one of those ones where you go, it's Link to the Past style, right? Where they've designed a map, but you can go into the breach, and it's that same map, but, different colors and maybe a different layout and stuff like that.
Okay, yeah.
And the breach sections are absolutely gorgeous. I saw one person refer to them as Game Boy Color level in terms of, like, the sprite work and everything. And nice. It's true. They're engaging. They look very good. But it almost took a hit on the non-breach version, which one would imagine is supposed to be the same level as the first game.
Right.
Where they look less like really detailed, like almost 16-bit sprites, and they almost kind of remind you of a DOS game from the early 90s, like a Halloween Harry. That's always my go-to. I don't know why, but it is.
Or a Manheek Mansion, right? Like, that level of,
Yeah, so it's just, like, I was sad about it, because I was looking forward to it, and as someone who, like, I didn't play Axiom Verge until last year, right? Like, I'm like, oh, I guess I should do it, because they said the sequel's coming this year, and I want to get on the sequel right at the beginning. Because the coolest thing about Axiom Verge, the first game, outside of everything that existed there, right? The one guy making it, all of this gorgeous sprite work, like redefining Metroidvanias while being a huge love letter to them, was this community of people discussing and trying to solve really just ass-backwards asinine puzzles that sometimes required deep knowledge of ancient Sumerian texts in order to understand how to, like, open up a door to get the flamethrower. Which, like, so it sucked coming to it 5 years later, because it came out 2015, and, like, I'm just going to look up how to open this, right? Because everywhere says, this is a very deep puzzle requiring this, don't feel bad to look it up, because we as a community solved this problem.
Yeah.
And then it feels even weirder to hear that there's an embargo on discussing this game amongst the people. So, like, they're even taking away that whole part of the first game. But then this game doesn't ever come to, like, the levels of esotericism that the first game came to. Everything is pretty much there. Like, there was no thing where I'm like, oh, I have to do this to that to that. There were, like, some items that were hidden inside of walls that even if you walk in them, you can't see your character while you're walking in the wall, and you just kind of gotta feel your way through them. And, like, that's not fun, right?
Yeah.
But, like, that's classic Metroidvania, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, like, you forgive it because it's trying to be an homage to it. And once the one person finds it, they tell you on the playground, then you know how to get there forever.
Right.
But yeah, I was kind of bummed with my time with Axiom Verge too. Immediately deleted it once the platinum popped. And it's had 2 patches on PlayStation 4. The credits still crash the game. And there are people who are saying, man. And because of the nature of the first game, there's a whole like area on Reddit saying, well, clearly it's an intentional fourth wall meta. It's crashing because you haven't gotten 100% item collection. And it's like, no, the game's just coded poorly. Because you can skip the credits, right? Like you can do on all video games. And if you skip the credits when they start, then you get to see the after credits scene. So it's clearly something in the coding of the credits that crashes the game when they're running.
Weird. That's just fucking wild. As far as like the community thing about not sharing secrets and all that, is this the same community that would have been involved in the Cyber Shadow Easter egg hunt stuff that we've been talking about recently?
Maybe. I mean, there's some crossover. One of the guys, sorry.
Is it possible that is a kind of a reaction to things like that of like, we don't want to ruin the fun, guys, like let's not give it all away, all of its secrets in the first 2 weeks like we did with that last one that was supposed to take 6 months
and we solved it in a day. I mean, it could be that. It could be like an idea of like, we want people to do this on their own, we don't want answers to be out there in the world. And I get that. I mean, again, I trumpet it all the time, and I was reminded of it. Getting the chance to play Bloodstained Ritual of the Night a week before it released really changed that game. Because there was nowhere to go. I had to just bang my head against every piece of the map until I found the way through.
Right.
And that was fun. That was fun and different. And I get that, like, maybe that's what they want to try to encourage with this game, but like, I mean, just because you say it in the Discord, Reddit is still there, PlayStation Trophies is still there, GameFAQs is still there.
Other Discords.
Yeah.
There are other kids can just jump onto a different channel. like you just like, it's not that hard to just have another Discord channel created that you and your friends are in, that you're sharing that stuff. Oh man.
Yeah. Yeah, like I found the speedrun I found the guy speedrunning it through my time with Cyber Shadow and my time in that Discord. I saw that someone was streaming, and I'm like, you know what? I'm curious what the speedrun's going to look like on this game, because the trophy is complete the game in under 6 hours. And I'm like, so if I can find like just something that completes the game in an hour, I'll feel like, oh, if I can try to do some of those strats, I'll be able to get that trophy without any issue. Right?
Yeah.
And then like the first run I watched was 27 minutes. And he's like, that was good. I was at 28 yesterday. That's my first run of the day. I bet I can get to 26. And an hour later he had done it in under 26 minutes. Like,
oh, that's fucking wild, man.
I don't know. And I'm like, thank you. You've made this speedrun look far more manageable than I thought it was going to be. And I did, like, just by watching it that one time, I'm like, oh, I just go here. Okay.
Ta-da. Man, that's great. I'm glad that you at least like had your time with it. You know, we make it sound like the fact that you deleted the game after you platinumed it like a bad thing, but to be entirely honest, you platinumed it, man. Like, you did spend your time with it. Right.
I don't know. I guess it's that, like, if a good Metroidvania, and I go back to the game that got me into these style games, is Mega Man ZX. It was a DS game. I bought it because Mega Man, and I'm a huge Mega Man fan, and I had like kind of slept on the Zero series. So like seeing a new one for DS, I'm like, I'm gonna pick it up. It's available today. I'm going to pick it up. I'm playing my DS all the time because I'm at college, and whenever I have a spare moment, it's pretty easy to pop out and open and play. And it was unlike any other Mega Man game in the fact that it's actually a Metroidvania. And you go and it's basically the Mega Man strats, but you have to go and find the Robot Masters as opposed to just picking them off a stage select screen.
Yeah.
And I ended up playing through that game a bunch of different, like, I beat that game like 8 times in the first 2 months that I owned it. Like, trying to find secrets and trying to do, like, different challenge runs that I imposed on myself. And to me, the mark of a good Metroidvania is, like, once you know the world, wanting to explore that world again.
Right, and break it.
Yeah, and break it, exactly.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I mean, like, that is the mark of any good game, really, is the fact that, like, yeah, I know how this story goes, but I just want to be in that world again. I mean, like, that's me with every open world RPG, right? Like, Fallout 4, like, I could give or take the story in that game. Infamously, probably one of the weakest Fallout story games since 3, really. And, like, and that's why I don't play that game over and over and over again for the story. What I do is I start that game up, and then as soon as I have the freedom to, I go off in a direction I never have before, because, like, there's still stuff I'm finding and exploring, right? Like, so I totally get that. You know, I kind of goes back to what I was saying about that puzzle game earlier, Human Fall Flat, is, like, the joy of that game is, like, not really solving the puzzles as they're meant to be solved, quote unquote, because, like, you can see the solutions, and the solutions are fun, and the first few times you do it, you feel really smart and all that, like every good puzzle game should. But the real fun in that game is once you understand how that particular world works, is then going back into that world, or as they call them, dreams. So you go back into that dream, and you get to play with the mechanics of that particular dream. So, like, there's one that's all about, like, axles and levers. And so you go in and you see, like, well, if I put this one in this direction rather than that direction, it flings me to a whole different part of the level I could never get to before. That's pretty cool. Like, and so, like, yeah, going back into those worlds and is definitely a mark of them doing it right. So, and, you know, and that's fair, but I don't know, man, it's just weird. Like, it's weird to get to the end of a game like that and feel like after all that time you spent with it, you don't know whether or not you even enjoyed your time with it.
Well, I mean, the first time I got to the end of the game, I was so surprised. I'm like, oh, well, I'll go here and then I'll probably get the item that is, like, blocking my progress to these other areas. And then you go in. The final boss fight isn't really much of a boss fight. It's turn on 4 switches, and the boss will cover them in, like, shields. So you hit them until you knock them out, and then the shields go down, and you can push the buttons. And there's no threat in these boss fights in this game, because when the boss defeats you, you respawn in the same room and all of your progress has not changed. Like, they really leaned into the fact that you can't die in the game because your body is composed of nanites. So they just reconstruct you.
Is there going to be, like, a hardcore mode at some point where that's not going to be the case, maybe? Like, do you think that maybe that is something that could be easily, like, folded in at some point in
I guess you changed the slider of it. I mean, the coolest thing about the game, and I do want to give some credit to the game, and this is a big part of the speedrun and what makes the speedrun actually work, is the opening of the game. You go and you explore and you fall down a bridge breaks and you fall into some water, and then you're swimming in the water and the water begins to rise, and as you're drowning, you find an urn, and that urn has the nanites in it that infect your body. And then through the story, those nanites take over your body and expel you into a drone, and then you have to fight to go get your body back. Like, that's the main stakes of the game.
Right. Okay. Right.
If when the water starts to rise, you don't move forwards towards the urn, but you just stay at the door that, like, gets blocked by a rock and drown there, you're still resurrected, but without the nanites that can take over your body in there. And you can complete the game in your human form the whole way. So it's a completely different way to play the game, and it's really what the speedrun relies on. in order to do it. Because as the human, you throw your drone, but when you're the drone, you're just the drone. So, like, throwing the drone as a human allows you to get the drone to places it couldn't get on its own. So it's an interesting...
But the game is able to be played that way. It's not like you've broken
the game wasn't able to be played that way until people found out that you could play that way. Because when you got to the end of the game, it would crash. Because it didn't know what to do with the human there. So it didn't know how to handle the game in that. And Thomas Happ, for everything that he's done, he has already that main patch that came out modified it so that the game would end differently if you don't lose your human body to the infection. So that's cool, right?
Yeah, that is actually very cool.
And then it becomes a canon way to play through the game. And, you know, like, there's nothing written there. Like, the achievements weren't written up with complete the game without losing your human form, right?
Right.
I mean, I think if you see it, the platinum trophy is lose all aspects of yourself as the wielder, right? Like, give in to the nanites.
Right.
Is basically what the platinum, like, flavor text is. So the fact that, like, people found that, and we're like, this is a glitch that happens, and Tom's like, no, I mean, you could do it, so I'm going to modify the game to give you an ending if you do that. Like, that's cool. That's a cool, this game is alive, and it's a different way to play the game, right? But it's still not really a hardcore mode. In fact, because the nanites never take over your body, in that final boss chamber, the boss isn't there. You just walk and you activate the 4 switches, and then the game ends.
Hey. I mean, that's actually, see, that's kind of rad.
Yeah. Like, and that's cool, but that's like, that was almost a mistake that was found in the game. That, like, the game is supposed to resurrect you after this, but you haven't collected the thing that, like, the negative infection of your body.
All right, man. Jeez.
Yeah. It's been a weird experience with the game, I'm not gonna lie to you. Gaming. Such a crazy thing. I did want to talk a little bit about movies, and this will be quick. I think I can get through this pretty quickly. I saw Rain Man for the first time last week.
Oh.
It was our Saturday movie. And Rain Man's a movie. Is an interesting movie.
Definitely is a movie, yep.
There's some, I mean, the character work in that movie is top notch. And I don't just mean Dustin Hoffman. I mean stuff that Tom Cruise does that then you see mirrored in Raymond's character as portrayed by Dustin Hoffman. So, like, very clearly they're brothers because very clearly they were both raised by the same shitty father.
Yeah.
Like, it's like real impressive stuff, right? But the real reason I want to talk about Rain Man is that it invented an entire genre of movie.
Oh?
I mean, the Oscar baity movie like that. It feels like every movie that's come after Rain Man that's been about sort of the magical...
yes, no, I mean the magical other, right?
Yeah.
Like it's everything from somebody with a mental disability to just being black. Like there's I mean, like it's The Blind Side, right? It's
Forrest Gump, it's Powder, it's Phenomenon, and I can't think of another movie. Like, I'm trying to understand as I'm watching Rain Man why this movie won Best Picture. Like, what about this movie was so Best Picture worthy? And then going after Rain Man, you find a lot of movies that are very much in that same vein as that film, with, like, the magical other. But then before that, you don't really see that. Maybe I'm completely wrong in that. I don't know. Children of a Lesser God is one that I, like, jumps to mind as I think about it. But that movie isn't about her otherness. It's just kind of like a beautiful story.
Well, and that's the line, right? Is that they're really towing when they make those movies. Is if they do their job right, it doesn't feel exploitive. But movies like that just feel exploitive. I mean, like that is the biggest critique that I could probably have about something like The Blind Side, is like, and I haven't seen Rain Man in a while. I remember Rain Man being very good, but I also haven't seen Rain Man in like 15 years.
Yeah.
So like I remember scenes from that movie. I remember conversations. I remember like moments in that movie being very like powerful and strong. But I bet watching it now, I'd be like, oh, right, this is a little cringy. But like, yeah, I mean, it's that sense of there always needs to be the real killer is there. Not only does there need to be someone of otherness that has some special ability that makes them stand out, but then on top of that, there needs to be a quote unquote like straight man character beside them the whole time that is either learning or is the only one that sees them for what they are. Like there needs to be they are the window by which we understand the lesson that we are supposed to then learn. From
it's
the
Green
other
Book,
character.
right? Most recently, it's Green Book.
Yep. Yes. Yeah. It is whenever there is this audience surrogate character that is either the lesson we're either supposed to learn is just like, oh, we need to change something in ourselves, or we need to go out and actively change something in the world outside. There's always a call to action in that character. They're just very formulaic in stock. Like characters in stock. I was going to say stock footage, and maybe even in some
maybe
of
a
them,
little bit, yeah. Especially, yeah.
But there's this idea that, but I like this idea that Rain Man kind of kicked off this genre. I would really have to go back and look, because I'm sure that there are definitely examples of films where otherness is exploited, and there are definitely white people, probably white men, standing there telling us, you know, the way we should be, right? I mean, like everything down to you could find elements of these concepts in like To Kill a Mockingbird, right? Like Angus Finch as the outstanding white figure, male, you know, figure that we're supposed to all strive to be because he's so open to the people of otherness in the story and things like that. Like, so I don't know. I don't know what it is that Rain Man does that really, like, I mean, it's the exploitation, I guess, right?
Yeah,
like it is the ways in which it trades in exploitation for Oscar bait.
Well, it's not so I don't think Rain Man clearly exploits. I mean, there's a whole scene where he uses his brother's ability to count to take $80,000 from a hotel. Like,
well, that is story driven, like on its sleeve exploitation. Yeah. What I mean is, like,
no, I know
it exploits you as an audience member feeling like feelings about a character of otherness just because they are other.
Right, but I guess I don't want to shine the light on Rain Man as the first movie to exploit in the way that it does, because I think on some levels, Dustin Hoffman, when he was like, this is a movie that I want to do, was trying to shine a light on autistic savants. Like, he's done a bunch of interviews about that he found out about this, and he's like, this is something that people don't understand. Most of the time, if someone is autistic, they're just put into a home, and we try to forget that they exist. So, like, Rain Man, for all of the negativity that, like, its legacy has created, I think it also did some good in the fact that, like, people now know what autism is because of Rain Man, and we've seen a lot more focus on, like, finding help for people who are mentally different.
Yeah, well, and that's always the trade-off. I mean, like, we should not ignore the fact that this is, like, the exact same conversation that we just had about Dustin Hoffman and Tootsie.
Yeah.
Right? It's that same idea that, like, you know, he is the classic, he is a classic example of the woke liberal Hollywood figure, like, that in their wokeness gets a little too close to the sun, right? Whether they become suddenly questionably possibly sexist or questionably possibly like ableist, or you know, like, and then this is the thing that then gets joked about in Tropic Thunder when we see Robert Downey Jr. in blackface playing a black character because he feels that he can do something with his star power for this community, and you're just like, okay, now you've just gone full-blown racist, right? Like, that's the joke, right? And so I think it's definitely, like, I understand the urge to want to point out the good that movie did. And I think that what we have to admit is, like, we're beyond that part of the conversation anymore, though, right?
Yeah.
Like, you don't make Rain Man today and have Zac Efron play that character. That just, you don't do that, right? like we need to understand that it was progressive at that time, but like,
I completely agree with you. I completely agree with everything that you just said. I would love to see Zac Efron and like Hugh Jackman do a Rain Man remake. With Hugh Jackman as Raymond and Zac Efron as Tom Cruise.
There you go. Zac Efron as Tom Cruise. I'm not going to give you Hugh Jackman as Raymond.
Well, I'm just saying, you know what movie I don't like at all is The Greatest Man Who Ever Lived. The Greatest Showman. That's it. Yeah. But their chemistry, I'd like to see in a different movie, and I feel like their chemistry could very well fit into that. Saying Zac Efron in that movie.
Yes. But I will say this, we did just get very recently a very, I think, and you know, maybe I'm wrong about this, but a movie that is very close to this exact idea, done as correctly as possible, I guess would be the best way, and that would be Peanut Butter Falcon that came out last year. Like, and so we have in that film, we have an artist that cares very deeply about that community. We know that that Shia LaBeouf cares a lot about that community because he himself actually had this moment in his career when he was much younger, where he played what was his ailment when he was in that one? He was mentally disabled in some way. I'm trying to remember if they named the specific like ailment that he has. But he plays this when he's younger, wins like a bunch of like praise for it, and possibly even an award or two at the time, you know, for his made for TV Disney movie where he plays the brother that to this girl that's writing about what it's like living with somebody with mental disabilities. And like, he from that moment on has been always very vocal about his love for that community, you know, for good or for ill. Like he very much took to that, right? So then we see him years later in his career doing that exact same kind of work again, but recognizing that maybe he should not be the one playing that role, and instead they go out of their way to actually find someone suffering from that disability to play that role within the movie, and it makes for a much easier to swallow pill, right? Like you watch that film and you feel much more like okay with the fact that you are viewing it, that you've paid money to witness this thing, but at the same time you also feel like it's finally doing the work that they have always meant to do, right? And that's where you come around to the idea of like, hey, maybe we should have people with disabilities playing people with disabilities. Maybe we should have people that are of these specific areas of East Asia play these characters, instead of saying, well, we can't find anyone that's that specific to that area, so we're just going to get the Chinese guy. Like, no, it doesn't work that way. Like,
I don't know. It's it really is just one of those things where watching Rain Man and then thinking like going forward. I mean, because you go back in the Academy Awards Best Picture stuff, right? Like, look at the 70s. A lot of it was gangster movies.
Yeah.
Or like Rocky. And Rocky is whatever, but I mean, he's a gangster too. He was working for the mob before he became a boxer. Like, that's what he does. So, like, there was this real focus on it. And then you get to the 80s, and you have stuff like Amadeus, but then you also have stuff like Out of Africa. So it's, like, really these, like, huge sweeping epics sort of take the stage as, like, what is Oscar bait in terms of that. Or, like, big romantic movies as well. And then you get to Rain Man in 1988, and then, like, that sort of becomes the recipe to make the Oscar movie. Like, and the only reason I really like quantified it in that way is Dale's like, this just feels like Oscar bait. And I'm like, well, but it wasn't. Because they didn't make this movie hoping to win an Oscar. It's that it won an Oscar, and then people were like, well, we need to make a movie like Rain Man if we want to be discussed in terms of awards.
Yeah, well, and I think part of it is that towards the end of the 80s and into the 90s, our focus on what a good movie was, quotes around good, like a well-made, I'll put it that way, a well-made movie starts to shift a bit, right? Like we start to see that action movies suddenly start to get just wildly crazier and dumber. right? Like we start to see that move away from like when a comedy wants to be funny now, like there's no depth to it, and that's when you end up in the early 90s. You end up getting to the point where guys like Jim Carrey and Adam Sandler are making their movies. Like there's this shift in the ways in which movies are viewed and made and all of that somewhere between the 80s and 90s that like would be a whole other fucking show for us to like talk about and discuss exactly what happens. But I think what you're seeing here with Rain Man is just one example of that, is that this is suddenly becomes what we focus on as a well-made film because of things like intimate moments between two characters, specific work that an actor does. We become much more in tune with the idea that a movie does not need to be humongous in order. It doesn't need to be a shotgun blast at art in order for something to hit. Like it could be a very well focused shot, small sniper shot, and be just perfect. And that, in some weird way, feels like much more of a challenge, right? Like you can't go out and make Ben-Hur and be guaranteed that everybody's going to be paying attention.
In fact, they did go out and make Ben-Hur, and I think I might be the only person who saw it in theaters. Did you remember that they remade Ben-Hur in 2016, I think?
When they were doing all of the old epics again.
Yeah.
When they tried to bring back epic film and for a while and it just didn't work. I mean, we stopped wanting big sweeping Hollywood epics and wanted much more focused films from our Oscar bait movies at that time. And I think Rain Man just kind of leads that kind of charge. Maybe it's the thing that sets off that particular spark.
I mean, that's how it felt. I mean, I haven't done the huge research into it, but for Dale to watch that movie and say, this feels like Oscar bait, and then to go back and be like, but there was no movie kind of like this movie before this film, right? Yeah. I watch Rain Man and I'm like, oh, this is where the wizard came from. This is why people think Jimmy Woods has autism, because the wizard is pretty much Rain Man Jr. They're traveling across the country. He has to take his brother out of a home because the parents don't want to deal with him anymore. There's a lady involved in it. Like, all of it just feels like Rain Man. And I'm like, I understand why people think Jimmy Woods is autistic, because the pallor of Rain Man that is being like just thrust upon this film, when really the kid's just traumatized from watching his sister die. Spoilers for The Wizard. I think we've said that like 8 or 9 times on the show, though.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting focal point. Like I never really thought about it before. I just think of Rain Man just as, just one of the classics at this point, and,
right.
And it's really interesting to me, like as a secondary, like as a B plot to this whole stuff of you exploring Dustin Hoffman's old work. Like, did you guys do The Graduate at some point?
No, I mean, I saw The Graduate in theaters like 4 years ago. Yeah, and that was sort of a capper to. I did a sound and light design for the show, the stage production. I read the book because they gave it to me. Someone gave it to me as a gift when they found out I was working on the play. And then I'm like, I might as well see the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the movie is a whole thing unto itself, though, right? But the ways in which that movie has aged, and we've started to really point to some of the problematic stuff in that. The way that Rain Man has aged, and we could probably point to some weird stuff in that. The way that Tootsie has aged, like Dustin Hoffman it feels like he's going to be that guy that there's a line where you could be that woke Hollywood figure that is always attempting to push these boundaries because at the time they're not being pushed, and then 10 years later you look back and you go, ooh, yeah, that's a little cringy now, but at the time it was really progressive. But as we always say on this show, progress means inevitably people get left behind, and like he seems to consistently be able to like get in just before a problem, like just as like something needs to be talked about, so we can't really blame him for starting the conversation. But also he's very smart in the ways that he doesn't make himself the only voice in that conversation. He walks away in a way that I think a lot of people don't, and that's when they get bowled over by the rolling stone of progress, is that they don't learn to fucking back down after they've made their point, right? And so maybe this is more credit to Dustin Hoffman than I should be giving him, but like he seems like a really intelligent activist actor in that way.
I mean, definitely. I can't. It's almost hard to imagine him going from Tootsie in '82 and then 6 years later doing Rain Man. Like it was kind of a cool like 1-2 punch, and I'm glad we didn't watch them like one after another. That there was like that breathing room between them to like kind of soak in the work he did to play Michael Dorsey in Tootsie, and then to play Raymond Babbitt in Rain Man. But like it's given me a different view on Dustin Hoffman, and like notoriously a method actor, but then also like he tried to use that method for good. And now this is completely out of my ass. I did not have this prepared. Like Sacha Baron Cohen, in terms of how his method is there to really expose and bring things to the forefront. Yeah. Like it might just be a weird like side effect of being a method actor that you also become a sort of activist filmmaker, because you're shining a light on things by inhabiting that thing.
I think that part of the thing is that you cannot, if you're going to become a method actor, right? You're going to envelop yourself in a role to the point where you quote unquote become that role and you feel what that character feels and all that other nonsense, right? So like whether you buy into that or not, we have to at least admit that is the idea behind method acting, right? So I don't imagine that anyone out there that does, unless they are completely like a fully like empathy removed, like to the level of sociopathy that it might medically need to be looked at. Like if you go into that and then walk away not wanting to then help those people, feels, you know what I mean? Like there needs to, it feels like it goes hand in hand with the fact that if you are going to honestly believe that you've become that for 6 months while we film that movie, then when you walk away from it, you're never going to lose that feeling. You're never going to forget what it was like to be that. Like that's like, and so yes, like by its very nature, it breeds activism. And so in that, the fact that it would attract somebody with activist tendencies is not weird at all, right? Like it feels like it goes hand in hand with empathy, right? Like method acting is, I think, largely influenced by how well somebody can empathize with the character that they're playing.
Imagine a method actor who had no empathy.
Yeah. No, I can do this perfectly. Also, fuck this character.
I have no idea how it would feel to be a woman, but I can play a man pretending to be a woman on a soap opera.
Well, and then, like, if you were a character, if you were a person that had no empathy who embodied a character to that point, and you had no empathy for them, you wouldn't care what happened to them. Got like the mental gymnastics, and like I at some point would start to fear for your safety from yourself, because if you don't care what that character, like
right?
That is wild. Yeah. No, like I said, like this is us going down the rabbit hole of really buying into the idea of method acting in a way that I don't know if I ever will personally be able to, right. But I feel like they would have no problem. Anybody out there that would call themselves a method actor would have no problem with me levying like an enormous level of empathy on them, gives them that ability.
Right. I think that it goes hand in hand. You're not wrong. If you don't have empathy, I don't think you can be a method actor, because the first step, if I were trying to do that, and I'm not really an actor, right, let alone a method actor, would be to try to empathize with the character so I can better understand them. Because right. how can I literally walk a mile in another person's shoes if I can't mentally or emotionally do that?
Right.
This took a weird turn talking about Rain Man, but
right.
But it's an interesting thing, and it's something that I think I'd like to dive a little deeper into. Which brings me to the movie that we watched today, which is the last thing I want to talk about. 1993's Sleepless in Seattle.
Hey, man. Hell yeah. All right. Let's talk about some Sleepless in Seattle.
What I really want to talk about in Sleepless in Seattle is how it set the stage for Frasier. In like no
Henri Report classic. This secretly was about Frasier the whole time.
Well, I mean, like setting it in Seattle. David Hyde Pierce plays Meg Ryan's brother, and then suddenly he's Frasier's brother. The guy who ends up playing Kenny, the production manager, has a small role in Sleepless in Seattle. The fact that Tom Hanks, just to kick the whole thing off, calls into a radio help show.
Yeah, no, man. I mean, like, it definitely sets up, let me put it this way. It opens the door for Frasier to then walk through and come into our hearts. Like, Sleepless in Seattle, when it came out, like, there wasn't a person out there that would admit they didn't enjoy it at some level, right? Like Sleepless in Seattle is one of those romantic movies that everybody kind of just was like, yeah, all right, Sleepless in Seattle, yep, I'm right there with you. And so, like, I mean, even my father, you know, the cold, heartless bastard that he is, like loves that movie, right? Like, there seems to be that movie seems to have the ability to invite anyone into it, right? Mm-hmm. So with that, like, the idea that we all then fell in love with the idea of Seattle, we fell in love with the idea of the call-in radio host in Seattle, like, all of that has to have somehow influenced some thoughts with Frasier. And then on top of that, as an audience member, getting to see the more of that world, in a sense, through Frasier, definitely. I could actually 100% buy this theory.
It was one of those strange things. I'm also, just like, as a thing, you know Delilah, the weird call-in radio love show?
Yeah, I want to dedicate this song to my husband. He's 3 years in Supermax, and I don't know if I'll ever see him again, but this one's for you, baby. And then it's like, take the money and run. Woo. And it's just, wait a minute.
What is happening here?
Delilah sending coded messages between, like, husband and wife. What's going on
Dude,
right now?
The craziest thing about Delilah, I went on a bit of a deep dive on Delilah before we recorded today, is that the weekday shows, you call and you send a dedication. Her weekend shows, you call, you tell her your romantic issues, like what's going on in your life, and then she picks a song that is, like, representative of what you're going through.
Oh, okay. All right. She basically created a pub trivia game for herself that she plays every weekend. I love it.
And she's been doing it since 1996, starting in Seattle.
Yeah.
And has she transferred over to a different national thing in 2014, and is now still played on, like, over 127 different stations, mostly owned by iHeartRadio, and on military radio. Which, like, that's nice, right? I do like that Delilah, for as cringeworthy as that show actually is, like, if you're the type of person who listens to Delilah every night, I'd really like to have a discussion with you about why. about what brings you to that.
For me, it's not even it's beyond the ability to be cringe because of the fact that it has been so like ingrained in, like, our culture, that at this point, like, if a month goes by and I have not heard Delilah's voice on the radio driving home from the grocery store at night or something, like, I feel like I've actually been missing something in my life. So like it's not even like I will tune in every week, but every now and then hearing it, I would call it comforting.
I guess for me, it represents a time where I was working at a radio station. So, like, I'm like, this is what I don't want my show to be, right? I was an on-air personality. I'd hear Delilah, and I'm like, I get what Delilah is going for, and she has her market, and good for Delilah. I don't want to ever be Delilah. And that's how I get things like my interview with Spider-Man, where the Green Goblin attacked the studio, and I did a little audio play that, like, strangers came up to me in the streets were like, that was hilarious. And I'm like, yeah, I just got bored. And I'm like, I'm gonna do a little play with Spider-Man because he's big right now.
Yeah,
I don't know.
But yeah, so Delilah and that, setting the stage for that as well. Yeah.
I mean, coming along 3 years later, starting in Seattle, and still being a part of it. I mean, the fact that, like, the go-to archetypal profession of a male lead in a romantic comedy is architect now, that comes from Sleepless in Seattle. I mean, I didn't realize... These Saturday classics, right? When we set out to watch them, we only have 3 left. And actually, as it turns out, we watched one of them on a whim. I didn't know that it was in the bowl, but it was on, and I'm like, we should watch this movie. So we really only have 2 left. It was Queen and Slim. I had put it on there because it had been on our DVR for 2 years.
Yeah.
And then we had like a night where Dale's like, I don't want to rewatch it, and she had to work till like 10 at night. So I'm like, we're gonna watch Queen and Slim then, and we did. And my father doesn't remember watching it, which is hilarious to me. He's like, we didn't watch that. I'm like, we watched it on May 6th. I wrote it down. But yeah, it's like there's only 2 left. The next one's gonna be Officer and a Gentleman. So prepare for me to talk about that movie because I've never seen it. And then I'm pretty sure the last one is Forrest Gump. But again, I don't know. I didn't even know Queen and Slim was in there. Or I would have not recommended we watch it in May. So, but it's really been this thing with the Saturday Classics where even though some things like American Pie were in that bowl, the films have mostly been ones where I can watch them and see the effect they've had on popular culture for good or for ill. And that's been interesting. Like that my parents, because like my parents cultivated like Sleepless in Seattle, and mostly because Dale had never seen it, but to then watch it and be like, oh wow, I forgot how much this like affected the world going forward.
Well, and what's crazy and what makes something like all of these movies, they are trendsetters. They are the first of the first to do some really influential things going forward. But what's crazy is you watch these movies and they still have a little bit of something in them that nobody else can quite nail. And like for instance, like one of the best parts of Sleepless in Seattle for me that I don't know if I could name another movie that really does this is you have this entire romantic film and the 2 romantic leads don't actually meet each other till the end, if I'm remembering like correctly,
well
right?
that let me tell you, they have less than 2 minutes on screen together, which is very interesting. But I had forgotten, and I think I can be forgiven for forgetting it. I was 8 years old when I saw this movie. I was the age of Tom Hanks' son in the film when I saw Sleepless in Seattle. There's a whole scene where she lies and goes to Seattle, and Tom Hanks sees her in the airport and is like magically drawn to her without knowing that she's Annie Reed, who wrote them. And then she goes to their house and there's that like weird, it's so stupid. It is like, if there's one part of this movie that has not aged well, it is like the 10 minutes where she decides to go to Seattle to try to confront him, because none of it makes any sense. But like she gets out of her car and he's hugging his sister who has come to visit, so she thinks that she's the woman that he's seeing because his sister's husband is not there for some inexplicable reason. But then he sees her across the street and they have this like long staring at each other moment, and then he comes over and just goes, hello, and she gets in her car and drives off. And I'm like, these are weird. These
are weird moments.
Like,
these are weird moments.
Like this is like,
it's just, I think they try to recreate this kind of like distance with You've Got Mail a few years later.
Yeah.
But it's never as severe as it was in that. And You've Got Mail was such a play on all of the things you loved about Sleepless in Seattle that like it doesn't count, right? In the ways that which when I say that, like, I can't think of another movie that it clearly influenced in so many other ways, but the fact that we've never seen a string of romantic movies where the 2 leads are maybe not like connected at the hip is wild to me.
Yeah, it is. It's strange. It's still worth watching. I will definitely say that. But I had forgotten the like weird interlude where I'm like, oh, so magic is involved in this movie.
And
like,
somehow,
I'd forgotten that bit. And like, there's even a whole speech from his little 8-year-old son about like, well, Jessica thinks you guys knew each other in a past life, and you couldn't get together in that past life. So, like, that's why you want to find each other now, because you each have a piece of the puzzle, and when you finally come together, like, the puzzle will be completed. And the whole time that he's doing that speech, Tom Hanks is trying to chase her down in the airport, because he saw a woman who, like, instantly gave him a Tom Hanks boner, which is different from a regular boner, I imagine.
But even the little kid trope you then see for years to come. I think of
Jerry
Lipinski
Maguire
and Jerry Maguire, right?
Yeah.
The human head only weighs 8 pounds.
Speaking of Tom Cruise and romantic comedy.
Shit.
Yeah. And I don't know. It's just, And if you really want a take on romantic comedies, and I want to talk about it, but we've gone on a long time. Ted Lasso, the 5th episode of season 2, like total like mastery over the rom-com genre.
Nice.
It was really, really good. I'd love to talk about it now that they've done 5 episodes, because I'd talk after 4 episodes, but the 4th episode was a Christmas special. And does that really count, or is that like a different whole thing to judge?
That sounds like another argument for another episode, my friend.
That's exactly what it is. So I guess just anything that you want to add, because I want to just put a caveat on the episode, like nothing big or bad, but.
No, I'm good to go. I'm still going through Skyward Sword. I have hit probably one of my favorite dungeons ever in a Zelda game. Again, still struggling with some control stuff, but some really beautiful elements to some stuff in the Lianyu Desert for anybody that's been playing along.
Right in the gear.
So the whole pathway under the sand stuff, the whole time stone stuff mixed with it is so wild how much I am enjoying that game despite itself. And more to come as I get through more of it, and if I can ever convince Deb to give it a shot.
Once I can get it for less than $60, I will probably jump on it. You get it to me as a gift. I always feel compelled to play gifts that were given to me. If a game's given to me as a gift, I have to try it. So like,
but yeah, just some really good stuff that way. Also, weirdly, like a lot of elements in Skyward Sword that I have to go back and figure out if they were always there, because like there's some stuff in this game that I feel like was laid down either critically or praised in Breath of the Wild that are just straight up just in this game, like map marker things and things like that, like the ability to fast travel in certain ways, and the sky stuff. There's a lot of elements in this game that I did not realize were introduced to the Zelda universe before before Breath of the Wild, and I had always been kind of led to believe that Breath of the Wild had kind of like broken the mold on a few of these things that I'm now seeing, and I'm like, actually, it might have been there all along. It's just that nobody fucking played Skyward Sword.
I actually think that's more likely. Yeah. Because there were definitely some people that I talked to in Breath of the Wild who were like, this wasn't Skyward Sword. And I'm like, well, nobody played that game, so it can be new. That's why people are excited about it. Because nobody played that game. I don't want to burst your bubble, but...
But I've been having a good. I mean, like I have been having a legitimately good time with that game, despite itself. So, like anybody out there that's like wondering if it's worth it, blah blah blah, is it worth $60 just for another remake and all that? Like, it's phenomenal. It's great to play a Zelda game again.
I'm just not excited to jump into 3D Zelda. I just have a natural aversion to it, so that's why I'm like, and it's already a game that like people are kind of hippie about. I mean, like, yeah, and just a big thing to go to your Breath of the Wild stuff, the stamina bar for Breath of the Wild lifted directly from Skyward Sword, right? Like, that's one of those things where, like, I saw someone playing Skyward Sword, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. I didn't realize that was, like, a legacy feature from this game.
Well, I mean, breakable and upgradable weaponry.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like the idea that you could pick up things that I will say the one thing that doesn't is your sword, because the whole point of the game is that it is the quote unquote master sword and Fi as a character and all that. But like the ways in which you can collect bombs and Deku nuts all over the world, your shield needs to be repaired or else it falls apart. You can have certain things that burn that you can then rebuy from Beetle and things like that. Upgrading your pack inventory, like there's so much of this stuff that I was just like, now wait a minute. Now we all talked about how this was new to Breath of the Wild and how it was very divisive when they introduced it to the Zelda universe, but apparently it had already been there for about 5 years.
So I mean, but I think where that becomes divisive, and again I haven't played Skyward Sword, is you do have the sword. Yeah. And you don't have any go-to weapon, so you can get stuck in Breath of the Wild without a weapon. It's almost impossible with just the level of like discovery of items and weapons in that game, but it is one of those opportunities where like you can get in over your head and have nothing, and I feel like that's where it becomes
Right, and I understand that, like, on the table of possibilities, it is definitely present. But do you know how hard you'd have to work in Breath of the Wild to be stuck in a situation where if you did not have a weapon on you, there was not one room away from you?
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. But
I just that is all I will say to that. Like,
but that's where the argument comes from. I think that's where people make the argument.
Especially once you get the fucking Master Sword. I like then you just it's fine. It's fine.
I don't disagree. And like I love how the Master Sword works. That like it has power until it runs out of power. I think that really works in that game. Right. And I would have been fine with that just being there where like you can use it but it's going to do half damage until it recharges. Like I'm excited for Breath of the Wild 2 to see how it evolves.
Yeah, and in Skyward Sword, you have the Master Sword the whole time, and it works as long as you're willing to dedicate 2 minutes of waggling your fucking hand in the air first before you swing it. But, yeah.
I mean, we could talk about breakable weapons in terms of, like, Deku sticks in Ocarina of Time. It wasn't a new thing. It was just, it became the central, like, combat conceit in Breath of the Wild.
We currently have a system in place where every time we're about to enter a dungeon, we make it a point to go back to Skyloft to repair everything that we can repair, because there's a blacksmith that will repair various things for you in that game. Make sure that everything's repaired, make sure that we've got all of the weaponry that we need, and we've bought all of the upgrades that we can from Beetle, and then we go into a dungeon. But that's like part of the loop for us now, is repairing and buying extras of things before we go in someplace.
Yeah, and I mean, that makes sense. I mean, like, the gameplay loop is going to evolve that way once you notice things. It's interesting. You're actually making me want to play Skyward Sword a little bit.
It's an interesting thing. It is a 3D Zelda game, and it is a 3D Zelda game with controls that want to fight you every step of the way. So like, don't let anything I say make you forget that aspect to it, because I think that is its one and greatest sin. So
yeah. All right. Well, it's something to keep in mind, right? It's something that, again, once I can get it cheaper, or cheap is free, it's something that I might do, because as much as I don't like 3D Zelda games, I've tried all of them, except for Skyward Sword. Skyward Sword is literally the only Zelda game that I've never put hands on.
Yeah, and
that's strange to me in the realm of everything. All right, so now the caveat on the episode. We mentioned we're recording on Saturday. The reason why it's the Henri Report is because Hurricane Henri is about to come and attack the upper eastern coast.
Yeah.
So if you're out there and you're listening and you're there, please just stay safe. Hurricanes happen, but as we've seen this year, the weather is changing because of a little thing called global warming and climate change. And that's why things like this are happening, where a storm has completely died off and gone back to tropical storm, and then was like, no, I got a second wind now. So just be safe. I mean, that's why we're recording, because we didn't want to not be able to deliver content to you.
Yeah, literally checking in with the family this morning as they were battening down the hatches. Like, I like, no joke, tying down the things over their windows and shit like that. I was like, oh, great. Thank guys. Be safe.
Yeah, I mean, I got the phone call last night saying, expect to be without power for several days. And I'm like, well, I need to talk to Sejohn about recording on Saturday then.
Yeah.
So I hope you enjoyed the Saturday episode, but know that that's it. But I'm doing everything to be safe. And Sejohn's not on the East Coast, but he is also dealing with his own weather-related issues in Utah. So
yeah. Because of global warming, actually, the fire and the smoke and the rain for a week in a state that normally gets this much rain and like spread out over 6 months. Anyway, yes, everybody be safe.
Yeah, just be safe. Like, know that it's happening, but like, if you're smart about it, you can make it through. Weather isn't new, right? Just this type and frequency of weather is new. And just be safe. All right. So until next time, if you would like to tell Sejohn about some other Oscar baity movies in the same vein as Rain Man, we'll have him cultivate that list, and he's available at Siege vs. the World.
And if you think you can do Axiom Verge 2 in less than 26 minutes yourself, send that video over to Dev at Devon and Decker.
Yeah, just make sure you wait a week, right? We don't want to break that embargo. All right. So Will, please bring us home, brother.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devon Decker and Sejohn Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.